Hi, and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Steve Elek.
And I'm Jeff Bartlett.
So as we've done in the past, we're going to devote an entire podcast to answering your questions. And truly, fielding these questions is one of the best parts about the job. Certainly, this podcast is made more fun with viewer and listener interactions. And you might be wondering, how do you get your question on the world-famous Talking Cars podcast? Send us everything. Text, 30-second videos, even photos to talkingcars@icloud.com. That's talkingcars@icloud.com. And if we use your question on the podcast, we'll send you a free t-shirt, some groovy kind of auto test swag. And as you can see, we have a picture of Keith from New Milford. I think that's even here in Connecticut, who had his question answered on the show and is proudly sporting the Consumer Reports auto test colors. Thanks, Keith. So if you want to be the next Keith, send in some questions. So let's just jump right into it. And we've got a question now from Paul from St. Paul, Minnesota, who writes, I was curious which brands currently have the best self-driving systems. I noticed that it's kind of hard to find a good or credible answer online. Consumer Reports has some articles, but none that were written or updated within the last year or two. It seems that technology like self-driving could change pretty rapidly. Is this the case, or is it fairly constant? If self-driving were the primary factor in my vehicle purchase, what would you recommend I consider when evaluating self-driving systems? For people that might not be aware of what self-driving is, you two guys could probably rattle down a few of the systems and probably use the whole words instead of all the acronyms that we're used to here at the track.
Yeah.
Well, I think first off, self-driving is a bit of a misnomer.
Right.
Because as much as we all want to jump in a Johnny cab, just like in Total Recall, and to have the car take you wherever you want to go, the reality is these systems have limitations and are mostly intended to be collaborative, meaning you got to pay attention. Most of them, you got to have your hands on the wheel, which obviously is a good idea when you're in a speeding 2-ton object. And how they perform does vary. So that is part of the reason why we haven't updated our ratings for a little bit, because there are so many systems, we're actively testing them, and we will later this year have new insights, ratings, and rankings to help people choose which is best. But for now, I think we've got some pretty basic guidance that would help.
But let's talk about what lane centering, lane keeping. What other aspects of self-driving are there that you can get in cars?
Yeah, the lane centering, that is what I guess the masses consider self-driving. But again, there is no true self-driving. For example, Hyundai has a pretty good lane centering system where if you add some steering input while it has the lane centering active, it will work with you. It will let you guide it, but then it will also continue to be engaged. Hyundai also has the driver monitoring to make sure that you're operating this safely. Because, for example, if something happens, you want the car to pull you over.
Because the driver monitoring system is basically a camera on the driver that senses whether or not the driver may be not paying attention.
Yes.
Exactly.
So really, the answer is to get something where it is. The lane centering system is standard, for example, Hyundai or Toyota. You don't have to pay a subscription for this service. Like some of the luxury automakers, you buy Super Cruise for GM, and then you have to pay a subscription down the line. So Hyundai has a good system. It's standard in many models, and then the DDMS is also available to really have that safe eye on you at the same time. So what's the best system? It really
we don't have a definitive answer.
No, we don't right now.
Because that's what Paul is kind of hoping for, I suppose.
Yeah.
And one complication, I think, of the answer is these systems are evolving, which Paul from St. Paul is referring to. And some may be of different generations if you're shopping one particular showroom. And I think to your questions about the features and so forth, you kind of think of where we are with self-driving as cars have been layering in different systems that have some pretty amazing abilities, whether it's to keep you centered in the lane or, read street signs or, adaptive cruise control, really building on what, basic cruise control did. And now these systems are being combined in ways that can add convenience And in some ways, they're also adding safety, particularly when they're monitoring you.
Right.
Which do them best, we'll know for sure a little later this year.
And some systems offer a certain amount of hands-free, right? So, I remember watching a Super Bowl commercial a few years ago, and it was just a shot of a guy in a big Silverado to the Queen song, "We Will Rock You." And the whole point of the commercial is he could take his hands off the wheel and clap along with the song. And I thought, is that really what automotive technology is for? It seemed like a party trick to me instead of why do you need to do this kind of thing? But I don't sell cars like the auto executives do, and sometimes they want to show something. But if that's what the future of automated driving is, then, is that really what we want?
Yeah, true. Yeah, valid point.
And with some systems, you can take your hands off the wheel for a certain number of seconds, I suppose, and then you'll get a little message in the instrument panels like, put your hands back on the wheel. To your point, Jeff, even with these systems, you have to pay attention. Right. There is no such thing as autopilot and whatnot, despite the marketing hype, and you still have to pay attention. And
of course, particularly because the world is a weird, random place. As amazing as these systems are, and many of them can handle almost anything, but it's that almost that's the issue.
Right. That's the scary part.
There's been a lot of talk through the years of, can they handle 99% of what goes on? That would be an amazing accomplishment if so. But if my family's on board, that 1% has me very concerned.
Right. And Paul is from St. Paul, which gets a lot of weather, a lot of snow, a lot of ice. And this is also, these systems are going to have some limitations when the weather gets bad.
Absolutely.
Because all the cars have all these monitors and sensors in the front. And when that gets caked with snow and ice and muck and all that stuff, they just don't work.
Right.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah. And there's a real irony with that, because that's often the situation you would want the most help. Right. You get a little snow around all the edges of the windows. You can't see as well. And it's almost laughable sometimes in the winter as we're driving around here in Connecticut. You see the system shutting off. It's like a cascade of warning messages.
Even like adaptive cruise control won't work, which is not, it's a pretty simple system. It's not, lane keeping lanes and the sensors reading the lane lines and whatnot. But that also that'll be an indication probably that you need to slow down because the roads are bad. Not that if you grow up in the Northeast or Minnesota, you need to be reminded of that, but you never know.
Right. Sure. But the technology is very exciting, and as much as it's been imperfect, and it's certainly interesting for us to continue to evaluate. The future is very promising, and that'll provide not only convenience for commuters, but may provide assistance for those who have driving limitations, as well.
And the cool thing is we're going to continue to buy cars here at Consumer Reports. We're always going to be looking at the latest and greatest automotive technology. Mm-hmm. So whatever comes out next, be sure that we're going to get our hands on it and do an evaluation. And so stay tuned. Next, we've got a question from Paul from Not St. Paul, who writes, it seems the list of new vehicles that includes a tire mobility kit instead of a spare tire seems to be growing. Are there any benefits for consumers, or is it just a cost or space-saving measure by manufacturers? Now, Jeff, you looked into this, and what do you have for Paul?
I did. I think Paul, not from St. Paul, partly answered his own question. Yeah, that's good. So like some things in the automotive world and elsewhere, these changes really came about to benefit the companies, not the consumers. So removing the spare tire reduces weight. And as everyone's chasing every fraction of fuel economy, less weight helps them pass the fuel economy tests. Of course, arguably, the extra weight, once you throw in your family and some cargo, just becomes a rounding error.
But you're right. They're measuring ounces at this point. They're not even just pounds.
And they're spending a lot of money to reduce the ounces. They just yank it out. So looking back at our data, we found that since 2020, about 9% of the cars that we've tested came with a full-size spare.
Not much.
That error is just about gone. And based on our test fleet, about 45% of the cars today come with any form of spare tire. To me, the tire inflator kit is a creative solution, but it does not address all types of tire failure. They're really designed to fill a little kind of pinprick hole in the tread. You put the goo in, spin it around, inflate it, and you're back on the road. But you get a tear or a large hole, and you're
Forget it.
stuck.
Yeah.
So then the most important tool becomes your cell phone and credit card, is you're going to need roadside assistance. The good news is many cars are available with at least a compact spare if you ask. The easiest way to tell is if you lift up the cargo floor in cars, you'll see if the whale happens to be shaped like a big circle. So, for around $200, you can often get a donut spare, as they call them, and the jack or, tire changing kit. In my mind, that's well worth having.
You could limp it home. I mean, in an all-wheel drive car, you can't drive a donut over a certain amount, a certain speed, right?
Oh, you're totally limited to 50 miles an hour.
But at least it'll get you to the tire shop or where you're going.
It gives you options.
Exactly. You're not on the side of the road with like a complete blowout trying to put goo in it that is just coming out the side.
I mean, anecdotally, when the Subaru Forester was introduced and we were at an auto show, and I did the first preview video, when I mentioned at the auto show that the Forester hybrid didn't come with a spare tire, we got an amazing number of comments on our YouTube channel that said, "No spare tire, no deal."
Outrage.
So that makes me think that a lot of car buyers today don't have any idea that there aren't spare tires anymore.
Oh, you may not discover that until you're stuck on the side of the road. And certainly having a compact spare gives you options.
Right.
It really does matter, because you think, well, if I'm driving cross country, I could be in the middle of nowhere. But even when you're around home, you can be in an inconvenient or unsafe place, like alongside a highway, or even around here, we often don't have cell service within a mile of the
certainly.
track.
Yeah.
That could be pretty inconvenient in the middle of winter, or rainstorm, or who knows.
I mean, it's also the difference, even if it's in your driveway. You throw on the donut and then you get to the tire shop versus waiting for a tow truck to come and pick up your car, or if the situation is where that mobility kit doesn't work.
Yeah. And I've often given out new car buying advice, and one of the things I would bring up is if you hate the idea of paying like premium fuel, it's a question you ask the salesperson. If you hate the idea of driving around a car without a spare tire, also bring that up to the salesperson and find out for sure. Or better yet, any car you're thinking about buying, open up the back hatch, look under the cargo floor, and see what's there to get an idea of what you're getting into. Because sometimes that's a comfort level that people don't want. And I know, Steve, that Jeff and I have both driven test cars and have gotten flats. Has that happened to you yet?
Yeah, it was the Mazda CX-90 that it happened in.
That's so recent.
It was like maybe 2 years ago or something, and it was in my driveway, like the situation I just described, where I just walked out in the morning and, I had hit a nail the night before or something like that. It was a slow leak, but it was sitting in my driveway. And I called John and he said, check the back. Is there a spare in it? And I was like, oh, wow, there's a donut. Look at that. And I was able to limp it back to the track here and get it figured out. But it was easier than having to call a tow truck and waiting for that. So I was happy to see that it was there.
And what happened? Which car were you driving that happened to you?
So I had it in Hyundai Elantra. It was a few years ago. Funny thing is, I knew when it was about to happen, because I was driving down this little narrow country road with a steep dirt hill right next to me, say about 6 or so feet high. And I saw a squirrel scamper, and then a rock tumble down. And I don't know if the squirrel smiled mischievously at me or not, but as soon as the rock hit, boom, flat tire. I knew it wasn't going to work, but I still tried the kit just because I'd never used one before.
Right.
Ended up waiting an hour or two for a tow to a local dealership. They took care of me. It was there that I asked, okay, so I used the kit, so now need to replace it. And the cost of replacing it was almost the exact same cost as getting a spare tire.
Wow.
I was like, well, let's do that. Spare tire and a jack, please. And at that time, a small car, small wheel, it was around $200.
It happened to me with an Audi TT, and there was a donut that I put on, but it also happened to me in a Lexus LS, and run flat tires, but the pothole just decimated. I could get it to a Lexus dealer that was nearby the highway, but my family, we had to take a cab ride home, and we were around Worcester, Mass, and it was a long night.
A cab ride from Massachusetts?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah,
So that would have been nice to have something in the car.
Well, because it was at night, and so the dealer wasn't open or anything.
Right.
And the funny part is, I hit the SOS button on the roof of the car, and the person from Lexus answering said, "Well, did you check for a spare?" And I thought, you have all the information of the car at your fingertips, and you don't know it doesn't have a spare. That surprised me. I was like, oh, okay, because yes,
Well, maybe one was available.
Of course I checked. It doesn't have a spare. But anyway, we've got a video question from someone who we've heard from in the past, and this is Darnley from Yonkers, New York.
Okay, team. If you could take a 14-hour straight trip to Georgia like I did, but you had your choice of a grand touring sports car, a sedan, and a family SUV, which would you pick? I'm curious. I did it in my 24 Mazda CX-90, and it was great. Family of 4. Thanks.
So a 14-hour trip to Georgia with a family. Great question. I love road trips, as people of Talking Cars knows. Let's start with you, Steve.
Having a family and wanting something comfortable to road trip in, those are really my priorities, especially because I have little kids. And when I think road trip, for me, that's like we leave at night, drive through the night, and get to wherever we are in the morning. Which
That's brutal.
But
Yeah, that doesn't sound like fun.
we did that going to the Outer Banks one time, and we took the Wagoneer, and the girls slept through the entire drive. Everything fit in the back. We had a ton of stuff, obviously, given we have kids. I think we had strollers at the time and a pack and play. And I mean, we probably wouldn't have fit in a sedan at this stage, but that is my choice. Wagoneer, fantastic road trip vehicle.
Jeff?
If you have a full family and you're going to be in the car for a long time, space is important. For me, the vehicle that came to mind was the Lexus TX Hybrid, which is a balance of power and efficiency and all the luxury, gigas and doodads. But it's fairly easy to drive. It's got tons of space for the second row. Fold down that third, and you have an absolute ton of space. Now, I have driven similar trips to this in luxury sedans before without a full family. And I will say the comfort of a real nice luxury seat is important, but if the whole family's along, space is one of the biggest considerations.
Well, you guys are talking my language, and I'll see your space and I'll raise you fuel economy. When my kids were younger, the road trip vehicle of choice was a Toyota Sienna minivan.
Oh, yeah.
Just unbeatable for space, for cruising range and whatnot. Now my kids are a lot older, so it isn't the issues of the beauty of the minivan that show forth. But just last weekend, I went with my oldest son to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, and we're here like outside Hartford, Connecticut. It's about an 8-hour drive to Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Old cars, old race cars, and I drove the Palisade Hybrid.
Nice.
Which was plenty of space. We had the calligraphy model, which is kind of unlike Consumer Reports. We bought the top trim, which was pretty awesome, but it was super comfortable, great cruising range, lots of space, really nice seats. It has this automated feature to give you a little bit of back massage every 30 minutes or 60 minutes. You can program it. So that was really nice. But listen, Darnley, you're definitely talking my language with road trips, and we hope we gave you a few ideas. If you're going to be buying one, let us know, because you do frequently get in touch with us, and we really do appreciate it. Next up is Noah from Richmond, Virginia. I have a Mazda CX-30 Turbo. I thoroughly enjoy the torque the car makes, so it's time to start shopping for tires before I replace them later this summer. Last winter was rough. Working in the medical fields means snow days are not an option. I worked a night shift and had to make my 60-mile commute home through 6 inches of fresh snow. I was impressed with how the car and my Continental Control Contact Sport SRS Plus tires handled the snow, but I'm wondering if it would be worth it to upgrade to an all-weather tire, accepting the trade-off in dry traction, or just stick with what I've got. I fear that if I buy the all-weather tires, it won't snow again for the life of the new tires. So I'm naturally on the fence. And Jeff, you looked into this and talked to one of our tire experts, Ryan Pislikowski.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's kind of an interesting question, because most people who express concern about winter traction, once you start breaking down, well, do you really need to hit the road in the snow, or can you wait until the roads are cleared? Find that they would get by just fine with an all-season tire. But there are definitely people that have to drive no matter what. We appreciate those in the medical community for doing that for all of us. So for his vehicle, I looked up on our ratings. I used the tire selector tool, which is at cr.org/tires. And the tires that he has are very similar to the ones we tested, UHP, the Continental Extreme Contact DWS 06 Plus.
Why are these tire names so long? They got a whole sidewall to fill or something?
Can you imagine from a marketing standpoint of expecting your customer to know that, as opposed to, just give me the snowy tire. I want the Continental Snowy. Wouldn't that be easier? Anyway, so he's got good tires, and he is right that if you switch to something that's got greater winter performance, you are going to have some slight trade-offs. But there is one tire in our ratings that really defies most of the rules, and that's the Michelin Cross Climate 2. So this is an all-weather tire, which all-weather is kind of a subcategory that refers to when a tire is an all-season, but also has true winter traction capability, meaning it remains pliable in low temperatures and it's able to grip in snow, which is exactly what he's looking for. So that would be my recommendation. I think the trade-offs would be very minor unless he races his car, but the gains would be the ultimate in winter traction. This is not an inexpensive tire, though. It is a bit pricey, but the upside, which probably many customers may not realize, is that it lasts a long time. In our tread life test, we predict it has a 95,000 mile tread life, which is probably twice or 2.5 times the one he has now. So the extra $50, that kind of washes out. The one key caveat with this, the tires are directional. So you got to make sure you tell whoever is changing the tires not to just move them about willy-nilly. They all got to be facing the right direction. The other little caveat, which Ryan wanted us to make sure we got in, was when you're switching tire types like that, you want to pay particular attention to make sure you're choosing the same speed rating. That will ensure that it has a comparable level of performance that the vehicle was engineered for. So with that Cross Climate 2 is a great tire available for cars and SUVs.
Wow, great answer, and thanks to Ryan for helping us out. But Steve, that we have this 327 acre here to test cars and whatnot, but we also get a lot of snow in Connecticut.
We do, yeah, and we took that opportunity this past year to do some testing on snow tires and to see, because of course you always hear about it and you say, oh yeah, people say snow tires are way better than all-season tires. And then you have the other group that's, oh, I have all seasons on my Subaru, I'll be fine. Well, we wanted to test this, and the results were that it actually was much better to have snow tires in the snow, both from an acceleration and a braking standpoint.
And Jeff, I'm glad you brought up the point about Noah. He's got to be out to the job, because I'm often asked questions about this. I was like, well, I need all-wheel drive, and it's always the question that I'm asking. Well, do you have the kind of job where you have to be? You're an emergency room surgeon. You're a police officer. You're a firefighter. Whatever. Or are you like a lot of us, where there's a hint of snow, everything's canceled, and no one goes out until the roads are plowed anyway? But in this case, definitely worth it to get all-wheel drive, and worth it to get some chunkier tires to get through, because you have to be out. You have to be out. Yep. So excellent question, and it does highlight how much time and effort that we spend testing tires. We have a ton of tire information at consumerreports.org, so definitely check it out if you're in the market for tires. Which brings us to Steve from Tennessee, who writes, just bought a 2023 Honda Ridgeline based in part on your reviews. It's a super truck, but I did not purchase it from a Honda dealership. I know wisdom would say make sure everything works, but this has way more technology than I've ever had in the past, and I find the Honda owner's manual borders on useless. So far, it seems like everything is fine, but I don't know how I could have sorted out all these features unless I devoted an afternoon to test driving, etc. What would be your recommendation as to how to go about ensuring everything is working? For sure, the salesperson has no clue. So, Steve, I will say that in all the years that I've worked here and bought cars, every time I bought a car, the salesperson has been falling over themselves to explain the cars.
Yeah.
And let me show you how to do this. Let me show you how to pair your phone and whatnot. And I understand that, Steve, we don't know how the vintage of the car that you're getting out of. So in other words, if Steve is driving a car that's, from like 2010 or something like that, the technology of a car from 2023 might seem a little overwhelming. But I will say, Steve, don't necessarily give up on salespeople. In other words, if you have a local Honda dealer, I would go to them and say, listen, I bought this car, and if I could have 10 minutes of your time just to walk me through a few things, what I need to know about it. Not only the salesperson probably think, well, you own a Honda, this is a Honda dealer. If we're nice to you, maybe you'll come back and get servicing.
Exactly.
Maybe you'll get a deal on an oil change or whatnot. So
We'll be happy to help you.
It's certainly in every Honda dealer's best interest to spend some time with you, even if you didn't buy from them. That being said, people have mixed experiences going to new car dealers. But so that's kind of my initial gut feeling, my initial reaction. But Jeff, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I'd like to build on that I think that's great advice. Make an appointment so that you can schedule a time that's convenient for them, ideally not during their prime selling hours. And 10, 15 minutes.
Not on a busy Saturday, sure.
Or just show up and expect something. By doing that, not only is it convenient and respectful to them, but they may be able to designate someone who this is their specialty. Because I've bought from some dealerships where while the sales staff is trained in all these things, there's a delivery expert that then steps in who really knows the systems. And the way he framed the question, how do I know that they work? First little CR alert in my head goes, don't go out there and start testing your automatic emergency braking.
Right.
But what he can do, and this salesperson or delivery specialist can help, is go through not just how the systems work by explaining it, but look on the screens in all cars. It'll indicate if the system is on or off. And sometimes there are sensitivity settings in addition. You want to make sure that everything's on so that you're not surprised of, oh, well, I thought it was going to help me stay in the lane, and it didn't. So I think that's probably the most important thing I'd add.
I just want to build on that. In other words, he's like, well, how do I know if this stuff works? If there's a malfunction, you will probably get an indication in the instrument panel that says something is wrong or something is broken.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, they would certainly get an indicator light for any of those systems.
Yeah. And Steve, there's also other things that he could do.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it any better myself than you both just did. But if all else fails and you're in a pinch and you're in the car and you don't know how something works, I mean, grab your phone and Google it or look for a YouTube video, because especially for a popular vehicle like the Ridgeline, there will be a wealth of information out there of people that put up, 1 or 2 minute videos of just, here's how you here's how you reset this light, or here's how you operate the infotainment system to change a setting or something like that.
It's almost like a generational shift, because my sons are in their 20s and they just go on YouTube and figure out how to do everything. Whereas like some of us grew up, reading about it. I'm afraid to show my age or anything. But one of the things that we've always said at Consumer Reports is new car owners, read your owner's manual. Is a wealth of information. I'm not trying to get into an argument with Steve or anything.
Except for this one, apparently.
Well, it can be a little
I get
done, because you're looking at this really very two-dimensional black and white thing, and really you want to know what buttons to push.
Right.
And a lot of user manuals these days are just like a mini user's manual and then a QR code that opens up the online version.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, the car companies do spend a lot of time and in some ways a lot of money, producing a fairly thick owner's manual, and it is a treasure trove of information, and we always do encourage people to read them to find out what to do, especially like when it comes to maintenance, tire rotation, things like that.
Of course,
it's all in there. Yeah. But if you're not a big reader, then there are other ways to go about this. But it kind of gives an idea of the complexity of new cars these days as well.
And looking into this particular vehicle, I found a bunch of really good videos on YouTube. But in general, I'd recommend also people start at just Google and search for it, because several of the manufacturers have good videos on their own site, which would come up in the search query, that they break down, okay, here's how automatic emergency braking works. And then they'd have a little video on something on that may not be as easily found on their site otherwise.
All right. And this is a Honda Ridgeline, which is a relatively simple vehicle in terms of controls, figuring out the settings and whatnot. It would be a different discussion.
It's not a Rivian.
It would be a different discussion if this was a Rivian, if this was a Lucid, if this was a Tesla, if this was some of the Mercedes EVs that we tested over the years. That is a different animal altogether. So luckily, Steve is sort of lucky that the car is relatively simple, and we definitely hope it works out for you. And that is all the questions that we have for today, but we definitely want more, so keep them coming. Send everything to talkingcars@icloud.com. And just to repeat, if we use your question on the podcast, you might get a cool t-shirt. Wear it proudly at your local car shows. And if you're watching on YouTube, we recently added a donate button to our page. Consumer Reports is a nonprofit, so if you're able to help us keep doing this important work, like Talking Cars, we always appreciate it. It all adds up. And that will about do it for this episode, which was masterfully orchestrated by super producer Dave Abrams and expertly edited by Andrew I Still Play Hockey Belize and Andrew and Anatoly, the great Shumsky. Andrew, Anatoly, they both begin with A. Give me a break. I know I've only said this 1,000 times. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics that we discussed. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.